Hi, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of Education Matters. I'm running a little ragged today, so I apologize if I'm out of breath. I literally ran in the door as we were going on air. So here we are. It's November the 7th, and Tuesday. It's election night. If you haven't voted, you have until 7 p.m. to get to your voting place. Please go out and vote. I heard a while ago that a record was broken in one of the wards. So I don't know what that might mean for everything, but every vote counts. Remember, the last time the mayoral race was decided after a recount by 64 votes. And I think it could be very close again this time. So the call-in number here is 640-3091. If anybody has any comments they'd like to make about the election or here at the 11th hour, there are people sitting about to have their food or getting in from work right now, and I hope if they're watching, they take note and go out and vote. It is important. I was out this week, maybe it was last week. I knocked on some doors for a candidate, and I was surprised that I met some people who weren't going to vote or who don't vote. And of course, we don't really know what that might be. I mean, it's always possible that they want to vote for, they're going to vote for a different candidate than the one who's standing in front of them, and therefore it's easier to say, I'm not going to vote, or they have views that they just, it's easier than it's an easy way to walk away, perhaps. So there's always that possibility, but it just surprises me when people people don't see the value for them in voting, and particularly the straight line relationship between their taking that piece of paper, just checking off the boxes and putting it in the ballot box. The whole process, ladies and gentlemen, is very simple. For those who haven't voted before, or for those who are new to voting and are a little intimidated by it, please don't be. It's a very simple process. You walk in, you grab a ballot paper which is for your ward, and you vote for whoever you want. You don't have to. In this case, there's actually some additional stuff. There's a vote for a flag, a potential change, so that we'd have a city flag, which we don't have now. We have a seal that's used as a flag. So, and one of the options is that just to leave that as it is. And so that's one of the choices. But, if that's something you're not interested, you don't want to do, you don't have to fill out the whole ballot. On the ballot, there will be, the choice for mayor. And then you'll have a choice for Board of Mayor and Alderman, and a choice for Alderman at large, which is, so you've got 12 wards, one alderman represents each ward, and on the Board of Mayor and Alderman, then there are two at-large positions. Every citizen in the city gets to vote for one of the two aldermen at large. You choose whichever one of that is. In this case, the aldermen at large, as I understand it, are unopposed. So I think there isn't any choice to be made there. So really, you're just going to choose your mayor for the next 2 years. You're going to choose your alderman for the next 2 years, and then you're going to choose your school board member for the next 2 years. Now, there are some other positions like selectmen, etc., and I'm sorry that I fall into the category of not always knowing enough about those other positions in the ward. But in terms of importance, the mayor, the alderman, and the school board, I think it's fair to put them in that order. I think that's the order in which they have an impact on our lives. But I think that more often than not, I think there may be a small group of people who are a little intimidated by the process. I think the larger number of people are apathetic to the process and feel as though, well, my vote doesn't count. And of course, that's just not correct. Your vote does. If you end up in any given year where you're in a ward where there are 1,000 votes cast and the winner wins at 700 to 300, well, then it's not that your vote is wasted if you were one of the 700, but but then you'll get the ward next door, or the next time round, it could be 1,000 people voting, and it could be decided 499 to 501. In many wards tonight where people are going to vote, if you're watching this live again on Tuesday, November 7th, the voting has an hour left, or just about an hour left to go. So. The vast majority of wards and races will be decided tonight by 100 votes or less, or a couple of hundred votes. That's where the majority of it's likely that's where the majority of decisions will be made in that sort of area. The other thing, as I was observing today, as I went around some of the wards, I didn't get too many, but I went to a few. The whole idea of having people standing around outside, I was one of them. I spent an hour and a half at one of the wards that it was for Leslie Want in Ward 4. Had asked me to hold a sign for which I very gladly did. But the whole idea of having people standing around outside wards, waiting for for a whole day from 6 a.m. in the morning till 7 p.m. at night, it's kind of ludicrous, I think. And I was talking with some people, some former aldermen and some various other. There was just a bunch of interesting people standing around today, and we were talking about this. And there's nothing set in stone about this. It's just how we have come to do it in the state of New Hampshire, and it has to do with the fact that you can't put a sign up or stick signs up outside the polling place because for whatever reason. And so what you are allowed to do is stand there with a sign on a board and hold it up. So if you've ever done this, it's as boring as anything. You stand there with this, stick in your hand. You wave at people going by. You say hi to the people that you know as they go in. But when I sort of approach it as from an uninterested point of view, when you walk up there, I think sometimes it's almost like running a gauntlet, right? I mean, it seems to me like I'm not intimidated by it, but I think some might be. You have to walk by this group of people standing there with their posters, and they're all very nice people usually. There's very seldom any real rancor at least I haven't seen much of it. Occasionally there might be a little, but generally speaking, in my 25 years in Manchester and in the elections, that's say 12 elections or something, every 2 years, I don't think, by recollection, I don't remember there being any particular brouhaha at any polling booth. But still, I was looking at it today, and I went to Hillside Middle School, which is the polling place for Ward 2, and there must have been, I don't know, maybe 20 to 25 people standing outside holding signs, and you have to sort of walk by these people and go to vote. So I don't know if it's the right. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't know. It's just a strange way to go about it. Why not just forget with the signs? Maybe allow everybody put a sign up if they so feel like it, and one sign per candidate outside the polling area, and then just greet people out in the street if you want to, and just have the candidates there or something like that. But it seems like just a terrible waste of resources to stand there holding a sign for no particular purpose. And it looks like we've got a touch of the. Oh, look at that! We had a blackout there for a minute. But we're back on again. The other thing, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this show, of course, this program is carried on public television. Sometimes it's at 3 o'clock in the morning, but sometimes it's at prime time, like 9 o'clock on a Friday night, I think it is, or 9 or 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings. And so oftentimes you'll see a repeat of this show at times other than the night that it's live, which is Tuesday, November 7th. So if you're watching this anytime after tonight, we'll be talking about something that's already happened, and people will be discussing the results of tonight's election as opposed to talking about what might happen. And I've been trying to think of what the world might look like with a new school board and a new board of mayor and aldermen. And in many senses, it feels, I think, the world probably continues as it was, that Elm Street will still be there, and the sun will rise in the morning, and so we're not going to see like some. It isn't like a drastic change, much as people would like to portray it to be that. I think critical will be the mayoral position and whether Joyce Craig is successful in her now second attempt at gathering the corner office. I'll go out on a limb because it's 6 something p.m. If I had my glasses, I'd know. But 6:10 or so p.m. on the night of the election, or 6:14. I have to say that reading the tea leaves, and I may be a lousy tea leaf reader. Reading the tea leaves, I think that the new mayor of Manchester will be Joyce Craig tomorrow morning, on Wednesday morning. But that's just what I think. It's not as though I'll be flabbergasted if Mayor Gatz is still there. In my case, I'll be hoping that it's Joyce Craig. But we'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, for anybody who's interested, the call-in number for this show is 640-3091, and I'd be happy to receive calls from any of you or discuss any topic you'd like to discuss. Again, 640-3091. I'm sure of a lot of the chattering class is out. They're out holding signs, and it's funny when I visited these polling places today. It's to call it a who's who would be the wrong thing. I don't, but just it's everybody that you ever sort of hear from politically is out holding a sign or working for a candidate. And I guess for someone like me who opposes apathy or thinks that apathy is the greatest danger to our democracy, then it's good to see people agitated and fired up and anxious to be part of the political process. In the end, that's what it's all about, right? The freedom. It's what, if you want to be profound about it, it's why people go and fight and die, and they die, for our freedoms and the freedom of self-determination. And here it is in action. And there's no place. The more remote from local it gets, the less impactful it is. I don't know if that's quite true, but let's just say it is in this case, and therefore, this is the most local and impactful election in our lives, albeit it's not a senatorial race or a presidential race or a statewide race. So there is a state race going on in Ward. What is it? Ward 8, I think, is it? Where Erica Connors is? It's either Ward 6 or Ward 8. I think it's Ward 8. As long as I've been doing this, I get these wards. Muddled up all the time. I want to take a moment here and just step away from politics for a minute, much as it's intriguing at this time of the year and on this night in particular. And I just want to talk about, and you'll forgive me if I'm talking about Central High School here for a minute, because I want to talk about sports. And those of you who know me will know that I'm a bit of a devotee of soccer. I like lots of sports, and my kids play different sports, and two of them played soccer, so it's not as though they all play soccer, but I have 4 kids, and so I'm exposed to other sports. But on this past weekend was the state championships for boys high school Division 1 soccer and the other divisions too. But Manchester Central, both the girls and boys teams were in the state championship finals this weekend. And to deal with them chronologically, the Central boys soccer team on Saturday night played an amazing game against Concord at the SNU Stadium. And first of all, it was such a wonderful Manchester event. It was really a Manchester Concord event, right? But it was a Manchester event. So many people from Manchester there. It was a pleasure. The stadium was over capacity, so they weren't in the brand new stadium further down the hill, which I don't even know if that's completed. I think it is, but it's in the stadium right there as you enter SNU, and and it was great to see. The bleachers were full, packed to capacity and beyond. They had to allow people out onto sort of towards the sidelines of the game. So it was a cauldron-like atmosphere. There was lots of cheering and shouting going on, and the kids, all 22 kids on, the 11 on each team, played extraordinarily well. Central High School boys, they had 80% of the possession or something. They were coming in waves at the Concord defence. And in fairness to the Concord defence, the result of the game was a 1-0 loss for Central. Concord won the game 1-0. They got a corner with about 15 minutes left or 10 minutes left, somewhere between 15 and 10 minutes, and they scored in this sort of, what's it called? Not ping pong, but when the ball rattles around, in different places, the ball just bounced around and ended up in the back of the net, and Concord scored. And then there was a frenetic and determined effort that went on for the next just more than 10 minutes as Central sent attack after attack in and just couldn't put the ball in the net. But I have to say, I was so proud of those Central boys. I know quite a few of them. My son was a senior there last year and played on that team last year, and so I know quite a few of them. Then I know a lot of them through Manchester North in my years at Manchester North Soccer League, and then just from school and from their time in middle school. So they're just sort of the first generation of kids who were able to partake in that charity-funded program that we had at middle school that started about 5 years ago. So just a wonderful Manchester event. Great to see those kids playing at such a high level. And I've been very critical when I needed to be critical. The last time I said this, I met with Coach LeBerge today, who's been the coach for 16 or 17 years at Manchester Central High School. And is just an amazing, great guy, does great work, very stellar work with the kids, and he's both as a coach, a mentor, and as a soccer coach. But I was saying to him today that when they last played, the boys last played 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe 3, in the state final, and the actual day of the final, I don't know what team showed up, but it didn't look like the Central team. They just played poorly. There were some great kids on that team too, but they just had an off day. They weren't playing very well. On Saturday night, the boys' team was just. I paid $22 to get in. I was telling someone because I had myself and my wife, so it must have been 2 8s, I think, and then $6 for my son or something like that. But in any case, for the 3 of us, we paid $22, and it was worth every penny of it. Because the level of soccer was incredible, the talent of the boys on there was incredible. They just did so well. And so it was thrilling and exciting and disappointing. And my wife said to me as we departed the field afterwards, she was saying that it was like her sense of disappointment around the anticlimactic nature of it. She said it was similar to her experience after one of the Patriots Super Bowls when that catch, on the helmet catch from Eli Manning, who played the Giants or something, that it was, or perhaps it was like the feeling that Seattle had a few years ago when that catch was made in the end zone by the Patriots, etc. But anyway, it was a fantastic game. A great advertisement for the city of Manchester and its people and its sense of pride in itself and in its sporting programs and what it's able to achieve. So kudos to everybody involved. So many great kids that I remember as little boys, playing on U6 and U8 and U10 teams at Manchester North, and other boys I've come to know over time. It was just great to see them. And two images are in my head, and there were other kids on there. And I don't mean to offend anybody, and this is sort of dangerous to do, but nothing's ever stopped me from sort of jumping in. And so I think about a couple of kids, and Griffin Hamill was one of the kids who was a senior this year. Who I remember him playing with his. I had him on a team years ago, and believe me, I had nothing to do with his success because he was a little boy back then, but. maybe U10 or something, but I had two sets of what I thought were identical twins, or seemed like it. So I had the two Hamill boys and the two Cacavas boys, so those were four of my 12 or 14 players, and I could never tell the difference between the two of them, or the four, the two and the two. So I used to sort of go, Cacavas 1 and Cacavas 2, or Hamill 1 or Hamill 2, or whatever. I still to this day will walk up to one of the Cavs boys. I always get it wrong. But anyway, it was lovely to see. He had just an amazing game in the semi-final and played to a level that, frankly, I hadn't seen him play before, that he'd gotten so good and improved so much. And the other young man whose sister many people know because she's a standout tennis player and is now playing at tennis at college, and I can't enumerate her successes, but she is a freshman and she's done extraordinarily well this year, and I think she's at Assumption, but I'm not sure of that either. But anyway, that's Will Chappelle, who played on the back. There was another back because Griffin Hamill was on the back left, I believe, and then Will Chappelle was at the centre back position, who had just an extraordinarily good game and played so well. Benny Tamzarian was at the back also, who's there and was an all New England player last year, an amazing guy. And I don't mean Benny any disrespect, because Benny's just a great player and has been, and you expect him to be. So that's the problem when you start naming names. I name Will Chappelle and Griffin Hamill just because these are kids that I think that they've just made a leap to the next level over the last 12 months. So congratulations to all of them. I don't think anybody should be disappointed. Manchester Central went to the final and were beaten honourably on a day when they played, frankly, better than Concord did, and just couldn't put the ball in the end of the nets. And that's what happens sometimes. But I know the coach, LeBerge, was very proud of them. And I just, as a disinterested in one sense, I didn't have somebody on that team, but just knowing those boys, I was tremendously proud of them and the way in which they played. And it augurs well for the future of soccer in Manchester. When you see it being played at that level, one would have been proud of it anywhere. And it should also be noted that team, by the way, was named by USA Today as the number 8 best soccer team in the United States a few months ago. So those who I have nothing against, Concord or Pinkerton or Exeter or Trinity or Londonderry or all the other fine high schools around the place. God bless them all. This is not a slight on them in any sense, and certainly Memorial and West and our other schools in Manchester. I don't mean them any disservice at all. But you can praise one without casting aspersions on the other. But those who do sort of chase dreams and chase these things, and those who would have negative things to say about our schools, and I'm one of those sometimes. In this instance, in this case, if you have a kid, or you have a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, or whatever, who's interested in playing soccer at the very best level, then having a school in the city of Manchester named the number 8 best school in the United States, given the size of our state, and then to go and play at the level at which I defy anybody to look at tape of that. I'm dating myself now saying tape, but look at and it's on public television, looking at that game, I think you'll see that those boys played amazingly well. Josue at the front of that team was, all-state class and beyond. Anybody watching him, if there was someone watching, they would have snapped him up. But now let me get to the second part of that thing, because the Central High School girls, soccer team, another team that I know pretty well, or at least I know some of the members on that team really well, and the girls' soccer team at Central High School has had some extraordinary players go by over recent years, and they played in the state championship on Sunday at Bill Ball Stadium in Exeter. Started at 4 p.m. and as it got darker, they played under the lights. Again, it was a great occasion. It was great to see so many former students of Central High School there, last year's teams, the boys and the girls. Some of the boys' team who had been beaten the night before at SNU, at Southern Hampshire University, were there. Great atmosphere. It was great to see, former superintendents and Mayor Gatsis was there in the stands. There were lots of people, again, a Manchester occasion. And the young people came out with signs, and I think they must have been the cheerleaders, because there were a bunch of people just standing in the stands with pom-poms and things. But Manchester was very well represented at that game, and it was Central versus Bedford, which has become a bit of a real rivalry, the Little Green versus the Bulldogs. And it should be noted that Bedford has been a bit of a nemesis on the girls' side to Central Soccer over recent years, and they beat them in the semi-finals or quarter-finals in each of the last few seasons, and always by a 1-0 score, or more often, I think, in penalty shootouts. And so, which is an awful way to sort of end the game, but it's the way when it needs to be decided, that's how it's decided. So, in this case, the Manchester Central girls overcame Bedford, but they did it after playing 2 full periods of 40 minutes each, with no scoring going on, multiple opportunities, just great goalkeeping, great defence, up against some great offence, and these two great teams battled each other. 40 minutes went by, no score. 40 minutes went by, no score. And then that's the end of regulation time. So the format is it goes to 2 10-minute extra times. And so at the end of the first 10 minutes, and that's sudden death. So anybody scores a goal and the championship's over. Well, it came to the end of the first 10 minutes, and of course it came to the end of the second 10 minutes. And it was still a draw at that point, 0-0, so it went to a penalty shootout. And I have to say that in the moments, the 5 minutes before that overtime finished, there were opportunities on both ends of the field. The girls were like their tongues hanging out. They were running on fumes. And they had played tremendously well. And so it went to penalty shootout. And that's it's a very exciting way to finish a game, but it's also it's a tough way to lose if you lose. And unfortunately for Bedford, they lost. And I have to say, they're a very good team. Bedford has appeared in 5 out of the last 6 state finals, a little bit like what Exeter did a few years back. And what Manchester had done back in the 80s and 90s a number of times. But in recent decade or so, it was Exeter on the boys' side for a few years were perennial appearers. And the last, I looked it up today, that Bedford girls soccer team played in 5 of the last 6 state championships, and they only won 1. So they've been beaten 4 times, most recently last Sunday by Central High School. Central High School hadn't won on the girls' side, they hadn't won the state championship since 2008. They did make it to the championship game in 2009, but ultimately lost. So anyway, to see this girls' game, and the really wonderful thing about the girls' game was, again, I saw all these faces of girls I've known for years, and I remember them when they were little, and I remember them I go back to my years at Manchester North Soccer, and I hope it's not too self-serving, and I don't mean for me, but I mean for Manchester North Soccer League. I think there's a straight line of results, sort of from the fact that Manchester North Soccer League does such a great job of bringing kids of all levels, all levels of fitness, all levels of interest, and just brings the joy of recreational soccer to 500 or 600 kids in that program every fall. And it's that foundation that bears fruit when you look at the players who've gone on to play for travel teams and are playing all kinds of AAU sports, etc. And to see that all come to fruition is just very rewarding for people involved in sports. And to me, it's a strong argument in favour of recreational programs and allowing kids exposure to sports and seeing where they go. So seeing those girls out there, especially given that the last few years they've had such great teams and have just been unfortunate. They haven't been able to quite pull it off. And as I was watching that game yesterday, there were a few names. I'm going to go to some other names again. As I watched the girls' game on Sunday, there were a few names came to mind. And first and foremost was Sarah Swetland, who was a standout soccer player who played at Central High School for 4 years. And I remember coming in as a freshman and just lighting the place up. And I think I remember in her sophomore year, she had something like 10 or 15 goals and 15 assists or something, and then she damaged her knee at one point, but came back strong and played was just an extraordinary player at the state level. And on that team there were some other great players, like we mentioned Will Chappelle on the boys team. Well, his older sister Julia Chappelle, most known as a state champion in tennis, but another great great midfielder. And I always think about Julie Chappelle because she was the only girl who played on a travel team with my son Liam back in the day. But some of those girls were there, and then Katya Lavasser and Emily Boyle and some of the others who showed up. So it was great to see them there. But remembering them, and they didn't get the opportunity to win a state championship, and it was so much deserved by them because they were great players and just didn't have what they say in Ireland, the rub of the green. They were beaten by penalty shootouts, and I remember a terribly windy day last year in the state semi-final and or quarter-final it was, and the ball wouldn't stay set because the baize, the green is so thin at Gill Stadium, and is due to be replaced, but it should have been replaced a long time ago, and so the ball wouldn't stay in one place, so it kept on blowing away, and Sarah Swetland went up numerous times, settled the ball, stood and ran back, and took the 5 or 6 steps back to hit it, and she'd come towards it and it would roll, and eventually the ball was rolling off to one side, she hit it anyway and missed a penalty, and or it was saved or whatever, it doesn't matter, but it was just very that was a great team. And so to see this latest group of girls go out there, and I was particularly pleased. And again, I know there are so many other faces on those teams, and I know so many of them, but I just have to say sort of what's in my heart, and what I don't plan these things before I come on to talk to you and say, I'm going to name these 2 people and not somebody else. And a smarter person, perhaps, or a less brave person, or a less stupid person, whichever one it is, would just not name names. But I prefer to be sort of forthright about it. So I'm looking at these girls playing, and then there were 2. So to start off. One of the standouts on that team is Hel Janato, who worked for me as a counsellor and at the British Coming soccer camps, again at Manchester North Soccer, and to see her out there being as a senior, being such a force on that team and doing such a great job, taking all their free kicks, etc., was just it was great to see some young lady as athletic and capable and talented as that. So kudos to her. But the other 2 were 2 freshmen on that team who I remember from the time they were like little, and 6 or 7 or 8. I remember them playing in U8 teams. I may have remembered them in U6 teams if I think back enough. But these are 2 freshmen, Emily Greenwood and Erin Fleury, who just last night I was so impressed with them both. To be state champions and playing at the freshman level is just a tremendous achievement. And we always sort of knew, I think people around them knew they were extraordinary players. They were really good. Erin Fleury has always, demonstrated that she's a special player. And I saw her play as a freshman out there. You'd never know she was a freshman. She was a thorn in the side of that. She plays offense, and she was a thorn in the side of that defense. A very dangerous player. Dangerous to a defense. Played tremendously well as a standout, and just a delight to see her play at that level. And then more surprising to me was to see Emily Greenwood, because Emily I know is a great player too, but I thought in my mind, because I don't know much, I'm thinking Emily will really be coming into her own. She's a strong, athletic girl. I'm thinking she'll get the sophomore year, she'll be a real presence there. But she was on that team and making a big difference on the right hand side. So I was so pleased to see that, and so proud of them, and proud of the whole team. But I was delighted for them there. So it's just so wonderful for young people to be successful. And I'm more of an academic guy than a sports guy, but I love sports too. And just like I love to see kids getting awards or learning things and becoming successful academically. This weekend, for me, a soccer guy, this was a special weekend to watch sort of the fruition of someone like Peter Lally, the coach at Central High School Girls, assisted by Mr. Pearson. Who've just, I don't know how long Peter Lally has been a coach, but he's one of the longest serving in the state. I mean, maybe 30 years or something. I've forgotten the exact number, but he's been a coach a long, long time. He's had a lot of girls go through that program, and to see him still there doing it, great credit is due to him and to Mr. Pearson for stepping up and assisting with that program. And then, and then the girls to respond in the way that they did. They ran themselves into the ground. Of course, Paige LeBerge is sort of a major star of that team too, and an important part of everything that they do. And frankly, with some of those kids, they're just they play at a level higher than their peer group. And so, the good news is that while it's unfortunate for Heather Ginato, I'm sure she'll go on to great things and may even play in college. I don't know. There are two other seniors on that team who were through injury or whatever weren't able to have an impact at the end. So really, from the team, even though they'll get medals and deservedly so, the team is going to lose from the team that played on Sunday. That team's going to lose one senior, and that's Heather Ginato. So it augurs so well for the future of Central High School girls team, and there are so many other great kids just right there in the offing, waiting to come in. So we'll see what will happen with some of those other kids as they come along. I know there's a generation of great little players right behind them who are freshmen also, and then there's a bunch of players coming in from Hillside in particular, who are really good soccer players. So I can't wait to see a team, led by Paige LeBerge with those other girls, and Erin Flurry and Emily Greenwood there, and the other girls who will be alongside them, and that will be a lot of fun. It'll be fun for me. I think it'll be fun for everybody watching. We'll have another. One of the Boyles will be coming along, and Sarah Gatsoulis, and just there's a whole bunch of kids, ready to come into that team. And I apologise for all the kids on that team who played great, because all 11 kids played great. The goalkeeper did a wonderful job. So congratulations to them all. The biggest point I just want to make really is that if you want to see Manchester City, Manchester young people, the Manchester community, and as represented through Manchester schools and through Manchester school sports, being at either of these two events this weekend would have warmed the cockles of your heart, as they say, to see a community come together behind these young athletes and to celebrate their success. So I definitely would advise anybody who wants to see soccer played at a very high level. You're going to have to wait 9 or 10 months until the programs begin again, at least at the high school level, and watch it there. And sadly, now to go to a negative for a minute, it's so sad that Manchester middle schools, contrary to or different from the other middle schools in the region, do not have tri-county soccer. And so there was one season where we had tri-county soccer, which I fought very hard for that program, and despite the resistance of people in the district, had the program passed, and we had 1 year where we had 3 years ago where we had middle school soccer, and then the program was once again abandoned. and now it's I talked to the mayor on this topic, and I thought he had my back, so to speak, on this one at least, because he claimed to have had in the past, and agreed with me that it wasn't right that kids in other middle schools got to play tri-county soccer, and they got on the bus and they played against Concord and Litchfield and Merrimack and Bedford and all the other towns, Windham and wherever, all around us. And Manchester didn't get to do that, and now we're not doing it again. So it's out of the budget again for this year, and it's been replaced by this Manchester solution to a Manchester problem. And I just want to say that there's a gentleman who stepped in and offered to help or to have some middle school soccer where the kids can play soccer. I think it's on Saturday mornings, and from the middle school, kids can play each other, and etc. And that's wonderful that someone has stepped in to do that. I just that's a for-profit business, albeit I think that they've offered their services for free to the district for at least this circumstance. But again, the experience has been, and I'm not accusing these people of this, but the experience has been that when you bring in for-profit soccer programs to assist with these things, generally what they want is the major soccer clubs, they're expensive. They're $2,500, $2,800, $3,200 a year to play, and so they're really looking for the creme de la creme, the top 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 kids, and the 8 or 9 or 10 parents who are stupid enough to part with the money, because it's only the top 1 or 2 kids should be parting with any money, if at all, anyway. And so to go down this road, and a mayor who has said for years that he's against pay to play, that the solution for middle school, instead of just financing middle school soccer for all the middle schools, including transport stipends, uniforms, buses, referees, everything, the cost is $30,000 out of a $167 million budget. That's the cost to have a full program across all middle schools, McLaughlin, Parkside, Southside, and Hillside, to have a full soccer program for 6th grade through 8th grade, travel teams, both for boys and girls separately, playing at the tri-county level. That's the cost of the city of Manchester. But we pulled that out of the budget, and you can make the judgment calls about whether that's where you want your money spent or not, but there's a real cost to this. But now I go back, there's an election on tonight, and if I look here, there's still, how much time have you got left to stop watching me and go out and vote? You've got 15 minutes. It's 6:45. You have 15 minutes to get to the polling place if you haven't gotten there already, and you're watching this on Tuesday, November 7th. But here's a mayor Mayor Gatsas, and the reason why I oppose him and why I would support people voting for Joyce Craig is because, once again, out of one side of the mouth comes the, I don't support pay to play, but yet on the other side of the mouth, we know that Manchester schools and Manchester sports programs and Manchester soccer teams at all our schools, West and Memorial and Central, all of them suffer from the fact that they don't have a supply. They don't have the 3 years of training and of exposure to travel soccer that happens to kids all over the state in other middle schools. And so we don't have that. So our poor coaches, Joe Silvera, coach of the year in New Hampshire back about 3 years ago, is the girls' coach at Memorial and Flo. Hector Urea, who was at West, I've forgotten the name of the gentleman who's there for this year, but they and Chris Laverge and Peter Lally at Central, they have to cope with this deficit. So other high schools, when we go out and we play whoever it might be, Londonderry or Timberlane or whoever it is, or Exeter or Concord, Concord Middle School, in the middle school, they had 3 soccer teams. They used one for travel that actually went to the other cities to play, and then they had 2 other teams at home. So they played intramural between each other in the afternoons after school during soccer season, and then were on the bus, a couple of times a week off and playing the other towns around. And here's Manchester, we can't even have a bus to have our players play between each other across the city from one side to the other. And is it the end of the world? No. Is it the most important important deficit and thing wrong with Manchester education? No, not at all. There's things way more important than that. But it is indicative of where we are, and it's easy for you folks to understand without me having to get into budget numbers and budget figures and explain line 47A and how we borrowed from here and we're getting federal funding for this and that funding's coming here, and people's eyes glaze over and they're like, I've had enough of that, all right, I don't get it. This is very simple. We're too flipping cheap in the city of Manchester to put a middle school soccer program in place. And yet we produced this great result that we produced this weekend. That's what really is my point here. And it directly ties into this issue that became a kind of an inside the beltway thing if you weren't watching politics in the last week and a half or two. But over the last month or two, Mayor Gatiss has made a habit of referring to the valedictorians, Nicholas Britton and Aidan Ryan, who were the valedictorians at Memorial High School and Central High School, respectively, and those two guys did give wonderful speeches about their schools as they departed. One to Dartmouth College, just a wonderful institution, and a kid that I know and like and admire quite a bit. Great family, great kid. And deserving of the honour, and then of course just as equally deserving, and another great family with a great kid, Aidan Ryan, who ended up at Harvard, and so they're both freshmen, and so my phone's going off here, excuse me. And so the point is that Mayor Gatiss used their speeches, without their permission or whatever, I don't mean their actual speeches, but referred to their speeches and said, here's an example of the great things happening in Manchester schools. Just like he was on Facebook praising, and wishing the best efforts, I'm sure genuinely, best wishes to the Manchester Central girls and boys teams as they go into their game. So, doing the wishing part and wishing well is all fine. We can do that. We can all do that all day. I wish them all very well too. I wish you all very well. Happy 7th of November. Happy everything. And I could be the mayor waving at everybody saying, oh, great, this is lovely and isn't this great. But when the rubber meets the road and when you actually have to do something, which is about leadership, about organising a budget that's sufficient for the needs of the students and the city of Manchester, to doing the things that actually matter. I don't really care for your rah cheering, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you doing it, but I don't care for it when it's covering up the reality underneath it. And the reality underneath it is that every other middle schooler in the state of New Hampshire, or certainly in southern New Hampshire, has exposure to organised soccer and is drilled in it and have coaches and have had 3 years of training before our kids get to go before their first coach. But just like in life, they don't have any. They're not given any. Special excuse. They're the Manchester kids. We'll give them a break. The referees aren't a little lighter on them in their games, nor will life be to them when they're not as well prepared as their peers are. So what is amazing, and the subtle point here, is the two valedictorians wrote an open letter to Mayor Gatiss, which, by the way, was refused by the union leader because they didn't have space for it. Imagine that. The mayor goes around for 3 months talking about the valedictorians at the two high schools in Manchester and how they're an example of the great things being done in Manchester schools. The two valedictorians, 19-year-old young men, sit down, put pen to paper and write a rejection letter asking him to cease and desist, and pointing out that they are the men that they are because of the schools they went to, because of the dedicated teachers that they had, and they make it clear in their letter, and it's available online if you want to go look at it. It's at Manchester Inklink if you want to find it on there, and it's on other social media, word for word. But they clearly point out that we achieved these things, and our teachers achieved these things, and our peer group achieved these things, Mr. Mayor, despite you. Despite the cuts that you made, despite the atmosphere that you created, despite the things you took away from us. We did it despite you, not because of you. So don't be using our names and our good fortune and our hard-earned positions at Dartmouth College and at Harvard. Don't be using that to justify your the negatives around your damaging and in their view, and I agree with them, of you damaging the Manchester school system every year for 8 years, pulling teachers out, reducing teachers, not funding fully, eliminating programs. That's what we've had 8 years of. I'm hoping it all comes to an end in about 10 minutes from now when the voting finishes, and that we have a new mayor, and that Mayor Gatsas, we can say thank you very much for the good things you did. We will stop complaining about the bad things you did to our schools, and we'll say thank you, and we'll put you out to pasture, and hope you find lucrative and purposeful things to do to help the city in your retirement. But your days for holding the steering wheel and having your hand on the rudder, if I'm not crossing metaphors too much, are over. The corner office isn't yours anymore. We need a new we need a new voice in City Hall. So to understand my point is the analogy with the soccer is the same, is direct. The reality with the soccer is analogous or similar to the issue with regard to our schools. The mayor will talk about, school of the year, teacher of the year. You know why we get school of the year and teacher of the year sometimes? Is when people sit up in Concord and they look across the state of New Hampshire and they say to themselves, where are the hardest working teachers? Where are the principals who are working despite an administration that rips from them the things that they need all the time? Which principal is working despite all the challenges placed on their plate by Mayor Gatsas and his enablers on the school board and board mayor in Alderman, who have no problem with defunding Manchester schools every year or eliminating more and more teachers every year? So what do you think they do when the state of New Hampshire looks down? So when awards are given by the state, they look down at the city of Manchester and they say to themselves, oh my God, the largest municipality, the largest city in the state of New Hampshire, the least well-funded school system, below average teacher salaries, buildings that are decades and decades and decades old with $200 million worth of repair and renewal that isn't funded to be done to them. No, not sufficient books, not sufficient technology. The least amount of funding per student, the highest number of pupils per teacher in the state. And then when the state in Concord looks down at that and they look at the socioeconomic standards in Manchester and the number of kids on free and reduced lunch and the number of kids with special needs, etc., and they think to themselves, I'm giving the principal of the award of the principal of the year award to that teacher in XYZ school, or we're going to choose the principal of Beach Street School, the poorest school in the city of Manchester. We're going to bring her up and we're going to make her the Assistant Commissioner of Education. Who deserves it more? They're working in the toughest school system in the state. And then Mayor Gatsas has the gall to stand in front of you on television and raise this up and say, look at this. Look at these people. We've gotten awards for the best school in the state. We got an award for the best teacher in the state. And we got an award for the best principal in the state. Of course you did. And you should get an award for Central High School and Memorial High School, in the case of these two gentlemen, should get an award for producing students of their calibre out of a system that's been attacked in the way that's been attacked by Ted Gatsas and some of his dream team over the last 8 years. Just as Coach Chris LeBurge, who wouldn't want to be associated with my rant, I'm sure, but nor Peter Lally, but just as Peter Lally and Chris LeBurge deserve great praise, and if there was someone to name a soccer coach of the year, they'd probably win it jointly for producing state champions and state runner-up teams from a system that is funded less well than the soccer system in all the schools that they compete with. The Central girls went and they beat and they won and they beat the girls from the Bedford Bulldogs. Lovely girls, wonderful girls, but girls who had 3 years of middle school travel soccer before they ever hit the freshman field in Bedford High School. And poor Mr. Lally has got girls coming in who have had no such experience walking into his freshman year. And after 4 years under him, the Manchester school system, Mr. Lally, Mr. LeBurge, the coaches and the kids in there and their teachers and their supports managed to bring these kids and make state championships out of them. Hoo-ah! We should be thrilled and delighted with the great things that Manchester school systems does. and the great things that are accomplished here every day, and the great students that we have, and the great parents that we have, and the great teachers that we have, and the great administrators we have. And at the same time, and in the same breath, with no sense of irony or without any problem, we should be able to condemn those politicians who have led the downward spiral in Manchester schools and who refuse to see it, who lie about it, who lie about their record, who try to trick people into voting for them by passing out artificial literature or lying literature across the district, and that's the way they want to win. I'm glad we're here tonight. For those of you watching this live, voting is about to close in about 2 minutes from now, and I hope people have done the right thing in the cities of Manchester. And then our coaches and our teachers and our administrators will still be the great people that they were. Our schools will be great, but they'll be great and they'll be supported by an administration, by a mayor and by a board mayor and alderman who actually will do the right thing, fund their schools properly, support them properly, and not just pretend and crepe paper over the cracks. I'm all fired up tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It's election night. I hope you've gone out and voted. I hope you've done the right thing. I'm very confident that Joyce Craig is being successful as I speak. I'm looking forward to a new day in Manchester, and I hope to be sitting here with a big smile on my face. I thank Mayor Gatsis for his 8 years of service as a mayor and his many, many years before that as a public representative. Thank you for the good things you did for the city. I regret all the bad things you did for our school district, and I wish you well in your retirement. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All the best now. Good night.